Diablo 4 just got some of its biggest changes to date, and some of those are already extremely controversial, but seemingly most of these changes, if not all, will make it to launch. There's also some massive dungeon changes, as well as a developer's note, and some other cool statistics that you can check out about your player experience during the beta. But let's just jump right into it. What's up, world? It's back with another video, and today we're checking out all things Diablo 4. So first up, for the big controversy, because this is actually a major change, and people are kind of questioning what is the result of this. And like I said, this is quite a big one, but they're removing the option to reset the dungeon, like completely. Like, you will not be able to reset any dungeon in any of the game, period. So people have some questions about this, if it just meant that the dungeons will reset after a certain period of time, or if there's some other things that you can go back to farm those dungeons. But they did also leave a developer's note, which gives a little bit more of an insight. And they said, while Diablo's Sanctuary is home to one of over 100 dungeons, the open beta only had the subset offered in Acts 1, which was fractured peaks for players to explore in a level cap that isn't fully representational of the experience at launch. There are many reasons to complete a variety of dungeons, including collecting power affixes in the Codex of Power, and players will still be able to repeat the dungeons by partying up with others and having them start the dungeon. We also wanted to make sure that resetting the dungeon wasn't a way for hardcore players to avoid death when experiencing a challenge in a dungeon. Still, we know that it can be fun to repeat a specific dungeon, and the team is looking at more permanent solutions to this, like having some reasonable cap at how many times a dungeon can be completed in a row to better support that style of play. In fact, in the full game, players will acquire sigils that will unlock nightmare dungeons, which are specifically designed to be completed repeatedly and are optimized to be highly rewarding and replayable. We'll have more to share on this in the future. So seemingly they removed the reset dungeon option because they don't want players farming it, and again, this is like a super controversial thing within the subreddit and everywhere, kind of YouTube. And even in my opinion, I don't know if I like that so much. I think that they should do maybe what WoW does and have it 5 dungeon instances per hour, and just maybe have the dungeon automatically reset when you leave so you don't have to worry about using the button. I still think you should be able to farm dungeons, as it is a core part of the game regardless, but they did say that that's going to be more of an end game system that they want people to focus on. I guess it does make sense overall. And even from the comments here, there's so many different comments of it. Is it going to reset on a certain time or time period, and no one really knows what's going on. I also don't like the fact that there's the party up now to reset the dungeon. I mean, then streamers could just have infinite amount of people invite them, and they can get infinite amount of dungeon runs. Again, it's not really like a primary example for most people, but it's just ways that streamers could take advantage of that, and I also don't agree with that either. I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. Now, I want to make a correction from my last video, because they did update, and there was some translation errors with that interview, but they actually did mention that the Lilith will no longer reset for each season. So once you get the Lilith statue, you'll have it forever on that character. Now, obviously, different characters will have to go get the Lilith statue. Now, some of the dungeon layouts also got completely changed as well, and they changed the way that players would be backtracking. They said one of the most common pieces of feedback we received is that players felt they were doing a lot of backtracking within certain dungeons. We optimized multiple dungeons across all zones to minimize the need for backtracking. And then they go on to list a bunch of dungeons: the Caldera Gate, the Defiled Catacombs, Derelict Lodge. But yeah, there's a few on this list, and hopefully that most of them don't feel like they need to be backtracked anymore. Although with the removal of resetting dungeons, it might not feel this bad anymore, although going from dungeon to dungeon and then having that the case could also be an issue. They also increased the dungeon events from 10% to 60% for the spawn rate. They also made a few other changes, like the momentum boost when carrying objects. And so when you're carrying something, you'll get a 25% boost to move across, which I think will be a little bit helpful for that backtracking stuff. The pedestals have also had their channel time reduced from 2 to 0 seconds, as well as depositing animus its channel time will also be reduced, and when animus is gathered, the player and nearby allies will also gain 10 resources, and they'll have the reduced cooldowns active by 1 second. Returning a portable object to a pedestal now fully restores health, resource, potions, and resets all cooldowns for all nearby players. Pretty strong one there. All doors will now generate a mini-map ping when they are opened. All structured objects in dungeons now have an additional combat mechanic players must overcome. It seems like some of the stuff is going to be a little bit harder in certain scenarios, and some stuff is going to be a lot easier, especially the backtracking stuff and the things that kind of felt like time wasters, to be honest. Now, they had a ton of class changes that I'm not going to go over exactly in this video, but you can go ahead and check them out, and I'll kind of just scroll through them quickly. It doesn't seem like there's any significant changes aside from Necromancer receiving a pretty big nerf, as the corpse explosion will now do a lot less damage. And also the summon minions, they said, will die more often, meaning that they'll probably have a lot less health. So Necromancer did take a big hit. Also Sorcerer did also take a big hit to its damage. Chain Lightning did have its damage decreased, and they also reduced its effectiveness against bosses. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this change because I really like the Lightning build, so that's unfortunate. Other classes like Rogue just got things increased, nothing too major there. They also increased the minions on the Druid, or their companions. They're like wolves. There was that whole meme going around that they were doing 17 damage, so they definitely heavily increased the damage on those. The ultimate skills got reduced in cooldowns. There's a few other visual improvements there as well. And the Barbarians also did get buffed a little bit. They got a 10% passive damage reduction. The Whirlwind skill now deals more damage and consumes more fury. Overall, it seems like they nerfed the Necromancer and buffed the other two classes, and then also buffed Rogue a little bit. And another big fix is that there was this little kind of like, not really a bug, but there was a thing, if you had an ultra-wide monitor, you could essentially teleport to as far as your monitor could see, and so you could stretch it basically as far as you wanted. There was even instances of people going across like map sections. There's like trees blocking away, and because they could see the other path on the other side, even though you couldn't with a non-ultra wide, they could just teleport to it. Seemingly they fixed that, so there's going to be a predefined length or amount that you can teleport across, so ultra wide monitors don't have an advantage there. The biggest change for movement UI is that the move and interact inputs can now be mapped to one button, while the primary attack is mapped to a secondary button. And that's been a bit of an issue, and that was also an issue in Lost Ark as well. Also seems like for the encounter section that they nerfed Butcher, I would think, for the lower difficulties, but buffed him for the harder difficulties, because they've reevaluated their difficulty and will present a greater challenge in World Tiers 3 and 4. It was already pretty hard in World Tier 2, so I'm not sure if they mean that they're actually going to make him even harder, which could be the case, but I think that they would make him just a little bit easier because he was quite hard, and it was like, on my hardcore characters, I basically had to run. There was no way to take him out. He was just rough if you didn't have a pylon or didn't kite correctly. I kited him several times, and then he would despawn by the time I can get him down. It was just a headache with him. They also did fix the bug in the thing that exploit essentially that rogues could do, which they could just basically auto attack like extremely fast. They have fixed that apparently. Now they do have another live stream that I will mention on April 20th at 11 a.m. PDT with game director Joe Shelley, and it looks like Riker's going to be back on again. He seems to be doing a great job with this game, so touche to him, so check out those live streams. I will mention that Diablo also sent everybody an email that played for how many hours you played, how many quests you did, how many monsters you took out. I'll showcase mine, which was quite a lot. I had 89 hours played, 161 quests, 44,000 monsters, and 3,000 renown, and I also mentioned in my other video that I had 1.9 million gold, and yeah, that was pretty accurate. I also completed 57 dungeons, so I did quite a lot of them, and I think I did basically every dungeon on the map aside from maybe one or two that I missed, maybe, but other than that, I had a pretty good time and I enjoyed the game. But with that, it does about cover it for today's video, and if you like it, subscribe, and to the next one. Deuces.